Hello, friends. Welcome to Fire with yours truly, Dr. Clint Parker. Did you ever feel that some of the problems that you face in life were way more than you could bear? Well, friend, if that has been your experience, then the book of Job has some encouraging words for you. Because one would look at the unimaginable problems of Job and think that the size and the weight of his calamities and troubles were more than he could bear. But the reality is that Job's level of misery matched his level of maturity. And this is because God completely controlled the narrative. In Job chapter 1, verses 6 to 11, it says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' Satan answered the Lord, 'From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it.' Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.' 'Does Job fear God for nothing?' Satan replied. 'Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and his herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." When Satan was looking for one of God's people to test and to try, the Lord offered up Job. And here Satan, the term or name literally means opponent, adversary, attacker, enemy, one who opposes God's people. And according to 1 Peter 5:8, it says, "Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." And so, friends, Satan is the accuser of God's people and finds absolutely nothing good in any of us. Revelation chapter 12, verse 10 says of Satan, "For the accuser of our brothers accuses them day and night before God." And so he aggressively and relentlessly launches his satanic smear campaigns against God's people. And friends, this no doubt includes you and it includes me. So I need you to lean in on this one. Lean in for a moment and ask yourself the question, what is my motivation for serving God? Is it really about giving God all that I have and all that I am? Or is it really about all that I can get from God? Friends, the satanic smear campaign is on. Now, please understand that when trials and troubles come our way, we will see in the life of Job that when God authorized the testing of Job, he gave Satan clear limits. In verse 12 of chapter 1, the Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then when we go to chapter 2, verse 4, the same limits are imposed when he says, "Skin for skin," Satan replied. "A man will give all that he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." David Atkinson commented on these verses when he said, "Satan is always only an adversary on a chain. Satan is always under God's authority and control. And friends, what this shows us here is the sovereignty of God. And the sovereignty of God simply means that God is absolutely in control and rules over all of creation. And this also includes all of the affairs of men. Friends, God sits high on the throne of the universe. One writer said that he's large and he's in charge. And when it comes to the sovereignty of God, friends, everything that happens occurs because God either directly caused it or he consciously allowed it. But one thing is for certain, everything is under the control of God. Daniel chapter 4 verse 35 says, all of the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, what have you done? And so when it comes to the sovereignty of God, no one has the power to contest him or the position to protest him. So when we look at Psalm 115 verse 3, this further emphasizes the sovereignty of God when the writer said, our God is in heaven and does what pleases him. And so, friends, when it came to these trials that Job was facing as imposed by Satan, God gave Satan clear limits because he is sovereign and the ruler over all of creation. Charles Dyer and colleagues said, while one would never minimize the power of Satan, it is also important to recognize that his power can be exercised only to the extent that God permits it. So friends, here we are. Tip number 2, acknowledge God's absolute control over your situation. Friends, God does not allow more than you can handle. I love the way someone said it. They said, Satan can turn up the heat, but God controls the thermostat. Wow. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13 says, no trial has overtaken you that is not faced by others, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tried beyond what you are able to bear, but with the trial will also provide a way out, here it is, friends, so that you may be able to endure it. And so in this passage, Paul spoke of the faithfulness of God, as it's defined simply as God's loyalty to us based on his infinite and eternal level of commitment. And so as such, my friends, we experience God's reliability, his dependability, and his trustworthiness. And what's vital about this understanding of God's faithfulness is that he is always reliable and he's unable to do otherwise. Why? Because he's faithful by nature. This is who God is. And as such, God can be fully counted on to fulfill all of his promises. When Gordon Fee commented on 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, he said, in his own faithfulness, God has promised not to allow what is beyond one's ability to endure. And so, friends, lean in on this one. The faithfulness of God guarantees that our hardship equals our ability to handle them. And so, friends, as we saw in the book of Job, chapter 1, verse 12 and chapter 2, verse 6, this is literally a match made in heaven. And so, friends, when it comes to hardships and the difficulties that we face, God sets us up to pass our tests. All we have to do is go through the process. And so In order to acknowledge God's absolute control of our situation, the first thing we need to do is really concentrate, that is, set your mind on God's sovereignty. My friend, when the trouble comes your way, when you face those overwhelming set of circumstances, acknowledge that God's the one who's in complete control of your difficulties. Every hardship that you face, every hardship that I face, has been authorized, allowed, and approved by God. And God also demonstrates his faithfulness by imposing limits to the suffering that we face. We saw in Job chapter 1 verse 6 that the Lord said, everything that he has is in your hand, Satan, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. Chapter 2 verse 6, God said to Satan, he's in your hands, but you must spare his life. And this aligns with what Paul said in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 3, where it says, but the Lord is faithful. He will strengthen you and guard you from the evil one. And what we saw in Job chapter 1, verse 12 and chapter 2, verse 6 was God putting guardrails around Job. And God does the same for us. And so, friends, there are limits to what God allows you to face and what he allows me to face. Tony Evans said, not even the devil can do his dirty work without divine permission. And so, friends, to acknowledge God's absolute control, we have to focus on his faithfulness. So while we're going through that suffering, that hardship that we're experiencing, think about the faithfulness of God and really stay locked in. Remember always that your difficulty matches your level of development. Your level of maturity can handle your level of misery. So whatever comes your way, know that God put limits on your troubles. He never allows you or me to face more than we can bear. God authorized it because we can endure it. When you ride an elevator, you'll see a placard that reminds the riders of the elevator's weight limits. And elevators have weight limits because too much weight will cause the elevator to get stuck between the floors. And in the same way, God ensures that our problems, friends, have weight limits so they don't get us stuck from moving and advancing in our growth and development. So because of this, friends, each and every one of us should be able to look our problems in the face and know that you can make it and that I can make it if we don't give up. God wants us to progress in our faith, which is why he allows problems to come our way. James chapter 1, verses 3 through 5 says, and you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work in you and in me so that we may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you don't know what to do, ask God. And so, friends, we acknowledge God's absolute control over our situation by also recognizing that he's completely involved in the process and he can see you through. In the book of James, chapter 5, verse 11, James said, as you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. When James said, have seen what the Lord finally brought about, He's emphasizing the Lord's active involvement in the process. And so, friends, suffering is never designed to be a setback. To the contrary, it is designed to be a setup. It's a setup for your spiritual success and for my spiritual success, because spiritual growth is always the goal. Henry Ward Beecher hit the target when he said, "No physician ever weighed out medicine to his patients with half so much care and exactness as God weighs out to us every trial." Wow. Not one grain too much does he ever permit to be put on the scale. Friends, my prayer is that when the difficulties of life overwhelm us and seem to be like more than we can bear, please remember that our sovereign, faithful, compassionate, and merciful God is in complete control from beginning to end, and He can see you through. Friends, if you got heartburn or felt your fire ignited because of God's word, please like, subscribe, share. Please help spread the fire. If you have any questions, any comments, any requests for future studies, please drop your comments in the section below. And for those who want to dig deeper in this study, my recommended resources for beginners, intermediate students, and advanced students are listed below. Until we meet again, keep the fire burning. Grace and peace, my friends.